Professor Bronwen Morgan, and I'm one of the project leaders on this, on this specific Bristol project that we're hearing about today. And we're delighted to gather you all in place for what we hope is going to be an energizing day of mutual learning. I'm just going to start with a couple of logistics. The toilets are, if you go out the door and right. So, I just want to tell you briefly how we came to be here today. So I'll show you the schedule for the day. This is the introduction, and then we've got basically two main sessions. We have quite a lot of time for discussion because we've got a really fantastic array of people from different dimensions of the energy sector here today. So we are hoping to have a lot of talk amongst ourselves as well. We're here most directly because the University of Bristol has been working with the Bristol Energy Network over the past 11 months or so on what's called a knowledge exchange grant. And that was from initially the University of Bristol's Research, Enterprise and Development Fund, which is intended to maximise the potential impact of academic learning outside ivory towers. So Caroline and Jake are going to tell you more about this specific project that we did shortly. But I also want to emphasise that the ability to all bring the speakers from across the country here today and hear about other energy research and this specific event has been made possible by not only the Research and Development Fund, but also the Cabinet Institute, the University of Bristol Law School, and the Centre for Public Engagement. So those are all different parts of Bristol University, but there's been a real engagement across the university to bring us here today, and we're very pleased about that. So thank you to those bodies. Now the longer genesis of this project actually goes all the way back to 2008, and I became involved on a personal level with Transition Montpellier, which was born that year, and along with my first child. And when I returned to work after maternity leave, I found that two trends had intensified: the impact agenda in research and calls for cross-disciplinary work. And the Faculty of Social Science had started hosting things they called sandpits, where they basically tried, it's hard to believe when you're outside university how little we sometimes talk to people from across the block, but they got everybody together to play with the promise of, instead of lollipops, instant money at the end of the day. And it's quite a fun way to work. And I linked up with some geographers and policy studies people. I come from a law background, or certainly legal studies. And we got some seed money to work with 4 different community-based energy groups in Bristol to try and understand better the role of community groups in changing energy-related behaviour at the household level. And we tracked some early projects in Westbury-on-Trim, Eastern, Montpellier, and Knoll West. And we produced a preliminary report and a large grant application. But unfortunately, that didn't bear fruit. And I guess this is one of the hazards from the community point of view. You must go mad with us because our timescales in academia are so long and so slow. And I appreciate that you started work with us and then it all drags to a horrible slow halt and we disappear for what seems like endless months. And I think this is a real challenge working across sectors that there's not much we can do about in terms of structural issues, but I think building the relationships that make that understandable is important. So that went all quiet for a while, but I think we learned from that studying shifts in household energy-related habits was a really different kind of project to understanding the dynamics of community groups themselves and then their relationships to government policies and laws in this area. And at that point, I would say our own learning trailed that of community groups because they got on with things at a much faster timescale than we typically do. And by 2010, they had institutionalized collaboration under the umbrella of Bristol Energy Network, which, if those of you who were down the hill at the launch this morning would have heard, has done a lot of fantastic work in the local scene. And by late 2011, a number of the groups have been remarkably successful in the Department of Energy and Climate Change, had a grant funding scheme called LEAF, Local Energy Assessment Fund, and 9 groups across the Bristol area were funded under that. And I was part of Transition Montpellier, and was one of the 9 groups that took up this really great support package, which Centre for Sustainable Energy offered to help groups take advantage of this funding. And I watched Transition Montpellier carry out the project in this brutally short time frame that was given by the government. And they were left at the end of the finish line exhausted and sort of gasping as to what came next after this. And it was in that context that myself and Maureen McDermott, who's my co-leader on this project, dreamed up the Knowledge Exchange grant over a long dinner at Tarby Cafe And we wanted to help the groups, as the project says, to maintain momentum in the wake of the LEAF grants. So the grant is actually called Maintaining Momentum. And it wasn't research, it was about working together with community groups to help research perspectives and community efforts have joint impact. And I mention that history for two reasons, because first of all, those challenges inherent in crossing the levels in the different contexts and spaces of household behaviour, community groups, government policies and laws, they're really sufficiently persistent that we've actually built them into the structure of the programme. So we've got, so session one, we tried to group some of the projects from the different national research efforts into energy, into a focus on energy at a whole community level. Whereas the second part of the day is more focused on understanding practice changes at the individual or household level and their relationship to community groups. Now, these kinds of distinctions often break down, and I'm sure we'll hear more about the subtleties involved in trying to keep an eye on both faces, as we ourselves also try to do. But I think it would be really valuable to try and exchange views today on how to link the different levels most effectively. And I have an increasing sense that the way researchers think about links between different levels is very different and almost bears little relationship to the most practically effective ways to link them, and that we need to make those different assumptions more explicit. Secondly, I made a mention to the personal history of how I got involved in this very consciously, because I just want to register what I think is a really distinct and constantly intensifying shift in the practices of universities towards a more thoroughgoing engagement with groups outside, and to increasingly blurred lines between personal and intellectual networks, and away from the sort of lofty detachment of the university, but importantly not away from an ever-vigilant critical reflection on the interests and powers that are at stake in building these kinds of networks. And there are pros and cons to these trends, and they're hotly debated. But actually today I just want to celebrate the process of building a long-term relationship with university groups, and to encourage us all to develop that critical reflective perspective on community university entanglement that all of the projects today have built, because they've all got these relationships between academics and community groups. And I hope we can foster enough trust and engagement as the day goes on to be brutally honest to each other about some of the challenges and how we can address them. And I finally wanted to just close by sort of starting to move towards just a couple of substantive comments, a brief observation really on the opportunities that we think would hopefully flow from today's workshop in policy terms. Because as you all probably know, and some of you were present at, we just launched the Bristol Energy Network, who we've been working with. And the word "we" starts to become very blurry in these long-term relationships. But it's been launched officially by the Mayor down the hill a fortnight into the national consultation period that the national government has on its community energy strategy. So we have a perfect opportunity today to hear from 6 different UK-wide projects on energy communities that will help us put the Bristol experience into national perspective from a multi-pronged bottom-up experience, and then feed that into a response to the national consultation document. So I just wanted to, we'll come, I don't think anyone here is going to present the national consultation document or the Bristol Community Energy Strategy to you in great detail. But that is what the Bristol Energy Network is called the Energy Wheel. It sort of sums up the Bristol Community Energy Strategy. And if you actually read the national consultation document, where they call for evidence on community energy initiatives across the nation, I think, as I read the two, there are 3 really interesting differences between the Bristol approach and what the national consultation document is calling for evidence on. Now, this is just my own personal opinion. But these issues might return in the different projects today in helpful ways. So the first of those differences is the centrality and equity. And when Iris launched the Bristol Community Energy Strategy down the hill this morning, she spoke very centrally about fuel poverty and the need for equality issues to be central to energy strategy. And it's not that this is absent in the national consultation document, but it's not nearly so central. And I like the idea of the wheel very much, because any other listing of the 5 priorities inevitably ends up putting one at the top and another one at the bottom. But the whole emphasis of this And I haven't actually, I should say, I haven't personally been involved in this myself at all, because I've been supervising this project over the last 8 months from Australia by Skype. So I'm reading this document really from the outside in a way, but really like the way that it puts its 5 elements into a mutually supportive relationship with each other. And that energy and economic, equality and economic benefits of an energy strategy are interrelated, and the economic is seen all the way through that strategy as socially embedded. And that doesn't come out really strongly in the national consultation. And a related issue is to do with scale, and I guess it's a reflection of that same point. I have a horrible feeling that's mine. So I'm going to look. This is Bach. The absence of the local economy savings in the national consultation document, in a way that's obvious because it's national government asking, for feedback on what they see as a nationally important issue. But I still think that Bristol's strategy creates the sense of what energy can do for the local economy as a broader, again, more socially embedded sense, that it's in terms of locally recirculating money and skills and the relationship of those flows to community resilience in a much broader sense than just energy policy is really vivid in that document. And there's no real sense of local economy in the national document, and there could be. I mean, it's in a sense leads to the third difference, which I've given the label technocracy in a way, but it's much bigger than that. It's just the idea that what's the role of community groups from the national point of view. There's a tendency in the national consultation document for community groups to appear as a kind of professional or proto-professional facilitation of community relations. They help smooth things over when policies are not going well. And there is direct reference to sort of the oversight of implementation of national policies and references to public engagement benefits that community groups can bring to the implementation of national policies. And that's a very different vision to what I see in the Bristol strategy, which is much more of an emphasis on the grassroots nature of groups, the inevitable and even desirable differences in the way that they will plan projects, or if they do implement national policies, do that. And a much greater focus on education and empowerment. So that there's a potential for an energy strategy to be part of a larger vision of democratization and a bigger structural change to a distributed energy system, which has a lot of implications for social relationships and political power that you don't really see present in the national consultation document, which I think is really present in the Bristol one and was reflected in the mayor's comments when he launched the General Solar City Initiative. So I would hope that we can pick up on some of those broader implications, as well as learn an enormous amount about the actual research outcomes of these interesting projects and the pros and cons of working together between the community and academia. So welcome to today. And